Here's a pretty little tutorial for what I call a rose flower out of wire. And I had a special request to do this, so I want to show you. I start off with a bead, and you see you can make these as pendants. You could hang them off, I don't know, as a handbag charm. You could just create them as decorations. So what we start off with is a bead, a central bead, and the wire I'm using is 0.8 20 gauge, but if you're new or a beginner to wire work, I would use 0.6 of a millimeter. Now if you have a pair of bail making pliers, these are just right to create the first curve, but you could use your round nose pliers just as easily. You want that curve to be roughly the same size as your bead, because you're going to push your bead into the curve and then use the wire to bend around the outside, just half of the outside of that bead. So just push it so that it sits nice and snugly to the side of the bead. And then you can continue curling the wire, it's like spiraling around the bead, just to frame it. So just hold the bead and the tips of the wire, with the tips of your chain nose pliers, and roll the wire around the side of the bead to frame it and just give it a sort of framework. Now cut it off the spool, cut the wire off the spool, leaving a nice sort of a good 2 inches, and then just bring that wire to the back of the bead, but bring it to the center back. So I'm just going to straighten the stem out now so it sits 90 degrees to that bead, and you've got that frame around it. And I want to make the stalk, or this protruding wire, nice and tough. So I'm holding it and pulling and twisting with my flat nose pliers, and this is work hardening the wire stem. So now I've got a more solid stem. The next thing to do is to create the petals, and we're going to go and make 2 layers of petals, 2 different sizes. So I'm using my bail makers again, and you're going to start off with a smaller size and make a circle, but leave a little bit of an extension, so it's just a little extra tail there. And then we're going to make a line of circles, which will be the petals. So I've been making about 9 of these circles. It just seems right, but you can make 7, you could make, it's really up to you. I've just worked out that this is the sort of the style that I want to make. So 9 circles gives you a nice sort of cluster and volume to your petals. So you just keep making, you're bringing the wire around. You could use a pen, any circular mandrel will do, to wrap around to make these. And then once you've got 9 in a row, take your cutters and cut off the spool, but leave a little tail again. And now we want the larger size. So again, do the same thing with a slightly larger pen or mandrel or whatever you've got to hand. And we're just going to do exactly the same thing. Create a long row of 9 circles. So just place the pliers in there, bring the wire around, and you just keep creating these circular loops. So I've made one earlier, so let's move to that, because you don't want to watch me repetitively create these long lines of circles. So you can see I've got slightly smaller, slightly larger, and then my center bead. So the next thing I'm going to do is, I don't want them to be so circular, these round loops, because we want this flower to look quite organic. So I'm going to take the tips of my chain nose pliers and create a little kink at the top of each one of these circles. So you can see I'm just doing a little sort of tiny twist with the tips. So I'm holding the wire where it crosses over, where the base of the circle is, and just doing a little twist. Don't worry if it misshapes a little bit. As I said, it's going to look very handmade and very organic. So a little kink at the top, or a little twist at the top, to take away from that rounded end. So there we have it. I've managed to distort them a little bit, and that's what I want. I want my petals to look more like petals. Now take your steel block and you're just going to hammer the very, very tip, or that edge that you've created this kink or twist onto. So do not hammer the crossed over areas of the circle. Just flatten and spread the very, very ends of your petals. And that just gives a more three-dimensional look to the flower at the end, because you've got this flattened area as well as the rounded wire. So it just gives it, I think, a more three-dimensional look. Right, let's get started on putting the petals on. So this is the hardest bit probably, because you've got to hold all these, things together without them sort of moving around too much. You go to that tiny extended end. It'll be easier with 0.6, I should add, but just go to that end and just make sure that it's connected and secure to the base of the stem, where the bead is. So just really connect it well, make sure it's connected. And now just wrap these petals around and around. Don't look at what you're doing, because otherwise you'll end up thinking, oh my gosh, it's all gone wrong. But just push them around the circular bead and then bring the longer stem to the center, and so that it meets your original bead stem, and wrap it around. Now you don't want to keep wrapping, you don't want it too bulky there, so just wrap it around once, then cut off any excess, and then you'll just use the tips of your chain nose pliers to make sure that it's nice and tight and that it's really secure and connected. So make sure it's all fixed to the base underneath the bead. Right, now we're going to make this flower open up. So you just pick up each petal individually around your round nose pliers and just bend it back. And that is like creating a sort of little lip, a backward lip. And what that does will shape those petals, create sort of shapes in the petals, and also open up the flower. So just, go around each one. Don't worry about what it looks like at this point, because we've got lots of time to adjust it and make it more even. And there you go. You see how it's just budded, and this bud has flowered in front of you. And now you can go around and just make sure that it's, if one petal needs pushing around one area, or if one petal is sticking out too much, just push it in. The wire is very moldable. So there's a start. You've got the start of one layer of petals. Now go for the bigger layer. Same thing. You want to take the short end from your row of petals, and you want to securely connect that to the back of the flower, and then just cut off any excess and just pinch the end so you make sure that it's nice and tight and it's not going to spin around. And same thing again. This is again quite hard. You've got to really use your hands here to push the wire around this layer of petals, around and around in a circular movement around the other layer that you just created. So just go round and round that first layer, and then you've got this long stem again. Bring it to the center, and this time just twist those two wires together, and that will be a safer way of connecting. So twist and twist and twist so that they're all joined, and just hold on to it with your flat nose pliers to make sure it's a nice neat stem and a nice neat twist, and it's not going to wobble off. By the way, if you're using 0.6, you might be able to twist all the three stems together, but you don't want it to be too bulky at the back, and that's the reason I only twist the last two. So we want to go back to bring those petals outward now. So with your round nose pliers, pick up each one individually and bend it round so that the petals are sort of bending backwards and opening up around the center part of the flower. And just keep going around until you've picked them all up. And you can see by adding these 2 layers of petals, you get this fullness of petals. If you just have one layer, it won't be as full. So that's completely up to you. And again, you can use 2 different coloured wires to do this. So I've used silver all the way through, but you could have used the inner center of those petals could have been another coloured wire, so you get a sort of 2-tone effect. So carry on just moving and, adjusting and moulding and really creating an aesthetic look to your flower. So there we have it, still on the stem, and you just spend as much time as you want adjusting the shape. So it does take a little while, don't give up too soon. Now with that twisted stem, create a little hook, and you're going to spiral that wire so that it sits at the back of the flower. So I'm just going to spiral it all the way up to the back of the flower and then just flatten it at the back so that it sits at the back and base. And that is now the back of my flower. You just push it down. And again, if that's misshaped everything, spend a bit more time just moving everything around as adjusting it as you want. So the next thing I could do is we could put it on a chain and make a bail. So I've got some chain here and I'm going to show you how to do a bail. I'm cutting about 1 inch of wire from my spool. This is 0.8. And I'm going to, with my whammer and on my block, I'm going to only hammer the center part of this wire to spread it and to push it out. So I'm hammering it out and pulling out the wire on one side, and then I turn it over and I pull it out on the other. So I just want to flatten the center part of that wire. And then I'm going to take my round nose pliers and I'm going to only hold the center flattened area and create a loop or a hoop just where that flattened area is. Now make sure when you've bent it round that both those ends are exactly the same length. So just trim it if you have to. And then create little links or circles at the very, very ends, each end. So there's one circle. You don't want them too big. And then create another one, exactly the same size, on the opposite side. So you've got 2 little circles. And you can push those together. I would put my round nose pliers back in the hoop so it doesn't distort and misshape, and then just push them to those ends, those circles together so they sit one on top of the other and they become sort of like one circle. And that's what you're going to connect in as your bail into the top of your flower. So I've got my chain, and now I just get my flower and I'm going to open one of those links up sideways and have a look which petal I want to connect it onto, which one looks the right one, and then close up that link, and then go to the other side, the other link, and open that up sideways, and then I'll connect that into the top of the petal and close that up, and then push those 2 circles so that they sit close together. You want to make sure that they sit really neatly close together. So you've got now a nice little neat bail that you can use to thread your chain, your cord, your ribbon, whatever you want to use can go through that. Of course, you don't have to make this bail. I just thought I'd show you how I make this style of bail. You could just use a jump ring. So if you're a beginner, I just go for a jump ring at this point. But there's always something to learn. That's why I thought I'll just add this in to this project. And then just thread your chain in, and I've got an eye of a clasp here. I've added a little bead to the eye of the clasp just to bring that continuity of colour back to my necklace, and that can be fed into the very last link of the opposite side of the chain so that I'm creating my own fastener, and just close that loop up or that link up, and there you have it. It's as simple as that. You've got a lovely homemade clasp on the ready-made chain, and a lovely flower necklace ready to wear. And you can make earrings to match. I've used a slightly smaller bead and I've only used one layer of petals. It's just a little bit too fiddly to do two, but they look fine for a matching pair of earrings. So I hope you've enjoyed the video and do have fun making it.